Hello, I'm Chris Flowers, and I'm conducting interviews for the Young Republicans, and today I'm honored to be talking to the Secretary of State of Arizona, Mr. Ken Bennett.
Chris,
Ken,
thank
you
you
so much for
My
your
pleasure.
time. I really
My
appreciate
pleasure.
it. Thanks for taking the time to educate us on state
Okay.
of affairs in the state
You
of
bet.
Arizona. Just wanted to see if you could please give us a little background. I'm Ken Bennett.
Okay.
How'd you start in politics and in public service, and what was your career path, and what led you to
Okay.
Secretary of State?
Well, my public service career really grew out of being raised by parents who were both active in Prescott, where I grew up. Dad was president of the Lions Club and on the city council, and Mom was PTA president and den mother, and she would even coach our Little League team when the coach didn't show up every so often. So I was just raised by parents to be active in the community, and after I graduated and my wife and I moved back to the Prescott area where I was going to work for the family business, I decided ultimately between the school board and the city council to run for the city council when I was about 25, and was fortunate, probably because of my family's good name, to get elected, and did 4 years on the city council, and then volunteered to be on a task force that then Governor Symington called about education reform. And that led to an appointment on the State Board of Education, which I did for 7 years. And then 8 years in the legislature, all in the Senate. I ran once unsuccessfully for the House of Representatives, just really intending that to be kind of a learning experience, and then I'd kind of really be serious the second time around. And then the state senator and both representatives from our district retired or went on to other jobs, and suddenly all 3 seats were open, and Bennett for Senate made a pretty good campaign sign.
Sounds good.
So I ran for the Senate and served there for 8 years. And then was back in the private sector after term limits removed me from the Senate. So that was kind of the reason I left the Senate, and then was back on Governor Brewer's request to succeed her as secretary when she took over as governor. So been back as been the secretary now for a couple of years, and was elected in November. So just really started at a young age wanting to be involved in the community and make the community where I was going to raise, where my wife and I would raise our children, a better place, and that's really what it started with.
Great, outstanding. Appreciate that. Governor Brewer and yourself really came into a deep hole when you both transitioned into your new roles. What are some of the hard choices that you've championed since day one when you took over the office?
Well, everyone that was involved, from Governor Brewer to the legislature and all of the agency directors and other constitutional officers like myself, have really had to make tough decisions to cut our spending, to try to keep our service levels up. Unfortunately, when she became the governor, the spending had grown during the last 2 years under Napolitano administration quite significantly, even though revenues had already started to drop. So my last year in the legislature, things were pretty balanced. Revenue coming in at about 9.5 and spending at 9.5, and we had about over $1 billion in reserve. But during the last 2 years of Napolitano's governorship, as revenue went from about 9.5 to 8, and then almost actually to 7, spending went from 9.5 to 11. And that just used up all of the reserves that we had built up for the couple of years before that. And so basically it's been tough decisions on cutting spending, and then trying to get a little more revenue into the state's coffers. The governor and legislature eventually put on the ballot for the voters to vote last March a temporary 1-cent sales tax. One of my biggest concerns, though, is that even with that almost $1 billion a year, we've made a lot of improvement from the $3 or $4 billion problem that Napolitano left, but we're still about $1.5 billion out of balance, and we still have to trim this, cut the spending, and it's looking like we're starting to have some growth in our revenue. So you never get into these problems in 1 year, and you never really get out of them in 1 year. And Governor Brewer and the legislative leadership have done a good job in closing the gap, but we're still not quite there. But we're working closely. If we keep doing the things that we're doing, cutting spending and getting the economy going, then those numbers will come back into balance.
Yeah, I've been walking around the state capitol the last few days, interviewing different people, and I've seen the jobs. Really, the focus of the jobs is jobs number one. That's what the signs say all over the state capitol. Local legislation has passed the business tax cuts, which was outstanding in my opinion. Can you maybe explain to the audience what some of those cuts are and how it's going to stimulate the job growth, and how it's a vast departure from the Napolitano administration?
Well, the jobs bill that the legislature and the governor just passed within the last few days, and I wasn't intimately involved in putting that together, but I've read a little bit about it, and they're trying to focus on reducing some of the business taxes, especially in some out years. Might not be a large reduction this year when we can't afford it, but they're trying to reduce the business income tax rates, for example. Currently in Arizona, if you make $1 of profit in a business, you pay about 7% tax. If you make $1 of profit as an individual, you pay about 5%. So there's a bit of a disadvantage for a dollar being made. And of course, individual salaries come from the profits of businesses. So we want to be very careful about making sure that there's a climate in Arizona, both tax-wise and regulatory-wise, that businesses can be successful. So part of what they did was to reduce the income tax rate on businesses so it's the same as individuals. I think there's a piece in there about reducing the personal property tax that businesses pay on every little item, desks and computers and chairs and all of their equipment, and may have done some things on capital gains and some other things. But just overall, they're trying to reduce the tax burden in Arizona so that we can attract companies in, and that will be the real key, though, is whether we can do enough on the margins to attract companies into Arizona, because the real long-term solution is getting our economy healthy again in Arizona, where people are working and making a good income so they can pay some income tax and then buying a few more things than they have been the last couple of years so that they can pay a little sales tax. Sales tax and income tax are the two big taxes that come into the state's general fund. So, you know, we've been too dependent on big ticket items for the sales tax, new homes and new cars, and so we're very cyclical in our revenue, and we need to try to smooth that out, in addition to attracting new companies to Arizona who will bring good paying jobs and get Arizonans back to work and doing the things that will help the revenue into the general fund.
A growth solution, not a tax solution, a growth solution. It's amazing how that works. Maybe you could tell us some things that you're currently working on behind the scenes to get the budget in line, help create more jobs, things that we haven't heard of yet, to bring those corporations and headquarters in Arizona.
Well, in the Secretary of State's office, our role is quite limited. I always kind of try to say that there's 4 main responsibilities in the Secretary of State's office. I do not have much of a responsibility in the legislature and the governor passing bills and doing things like that. So I have been kind of focused on what can we do in what is a relatively small agency. The state spends somewhere between $9 or $10 billion a year. And in the Secretary of State's office, I have responsibility for about 10 million. So it's a very, it's less than probably 1/100th of 1% or something. But in our office, we're focused on, we have elections, so we're trying to make sure that our election processes in Arizona are the very best in the world, so that people who are voting are the ones that are supposed to be voting and not illegals or non-residents of the state or whatever it is. So the whole election process, we're looking for ways to make that better and be more efficient. We work very closely with the counties because they're the ones that really conduct the elections on the ground. We do have a business services division in the Secretary's office. Partnerships are created in the Secretary's office as opposed to corporations, and LLCs are over at the Arizona Corporation Commission. Trademarks and trade names come out of our office. One of the things we've been trying to do is reduce our turnaround times for companies that are trying to get started or get a trademark or a trade name. And we've been able to reduce our wait times from 10 days to 2 weeks to 3 to 5 days in most cases, so that businesses can get up and running. And we're also working on kind of behind the scenes right now on a more on an electronic system where people can go online and file a lot of the documents that they now have to come in person or send in paper.
Okay.
And then it takes a lot of staff time for us to retype into our files all the things that they've written or typed on a piece of paper. So we hope within the next few months to be unveiling an online system, so a lot of our filings and things like that can be done online, and people aren't having to drive down to our offices.
That's great. That's great. And with that, we'll take a short break and come back with Ken Bennett.